Marcus and Priya started on the same Monday in the same cubicle row at the same company for the same salary. $58,000 a year entry level, benefits kick in after 90 days. My name is Horizon, and 31 years later, Priya retires with about $900,000 more than Marcus. Because she got promoted faster. Because she inherited money, married rich, or picked a hot stock. She retires at the same title, one rung above where she started, having taken exactly one more promotion than Marcus in 3 decades. And she still walks out with nearly $1 million he never touches. If that sounds impossible, it's because you've been told the wrong story about what makes people rich. It was never mostly about the salary. It's about 4 decisions made mostly in the first 5 years that neither of them thought was a decision at all. Quick warning before we start. Every figure here assumes historical averages and current plan rules, both of which move. Check your own plan documents before you act on anything in this video. I'll give you a checklist at the end. Let's start with the paycheck stub, because that's the only piece of paper either of them ever really looked at. Marcus opened his HR packet in week 1, saw a line for 401k enrollment, saw a default contribution rate and moved on. Was 23. He had student loans, a used Honda payment, and a roommate who was late on rent more often than not. Retirement at 23 is not a decision. It's a form you didn't fill out. Priya opened the same packet. She also had loans. She also had a used car. The difference is her older sister, 4 years into her own career, had told her exactly one sentence. Whatever they match, put in at least that much on day 1 before you ever see the money. That's it. That's the entire sentence that becomes 900. Here's the part almost nobody explains correctly, and it's worth sitting on for a second. Dollar contributed at 23 is not worth the same as a dollar contributed at 35.
We have
Assume
seen
a 7%
consistent
average
growth.
annual return,
We are hitting all our
which
targets.
is on the conservative
An
side
average
of
of
the last
7 for
century
7%.
of U.S. market history.
This is a
Dollar invested at 23 has 42 years to compound before age 65. That same dollar invested at 35 has 30 years. The 23-year-old's dollar grows to roughly 60, 70. The $30 5-year-old's dollar grows to about 760. Same dollar, same market, same return. More than double the outcome purely because of when it entered the account. Money doesn't care how hard you worked for it. It only cares how long it's had to sit there. Marcus enrolled at 28 when a coworker mentioned the company match during a lunch break. He did the mental math on free money finally landing on the right side of his attention. 5 years. That's the entire gap between them at the start. 5 years of a modest contribution, growing for 4 decades. 5 years, compounded at market average rates starting that early, is not a rounding error. It is, on its own, worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $150,000 to $200,000 by retirement. We haven't even gotten to the other 3 decisions yet. So decision 1 is simply, when did the money start working? When did you start earning it? When did it start compounding? It's not just that Priya's money had more time. It's that compounding is exponential, not linear. Exponential curves are backloaded. The growth in the last 10 years of Priya's account dwarfs the growth in the first 10. Money made early isn't just money. It's the seed for money made late, which becomes the seed for money made later still. Marcus isn't behind by 5 years of contributions. He's behind by 5 years of a compounding machine that was already running while he sat idle. Now, decision 2, and this is the one that should genuinely irritate you. Because it involves money that was never anyone's to withhold. The employer match. Plans in America offer some version of it. A common structure is 50 cents on the dollar up to 6% of salary. Priya's company offered exactly that. Put in 6%, they add 3%. That 3% is not a bonus. It is compensation you already earned that simply gets routed through a retirement account. Only way to collect it is to opt in. Marcus, for his first 5 years, contributed nothing, which means for 5 years he left every dollar of that 3% match sitting on the table, permanently. Research from Vanguard's own plan data has repeatedly found that a meaningful share of eligible employees, often cited around 1 in 5, don't participate at all. That's not laziness in the way we usually mean the word. Nobody at open enrollment sits you down and says, in plain English, This box represents thousands of dollars of your own salary that evaporates if you leave it unchecked. The form doesn't say that. It just says elect your contribution percentage, which reads like paperwork, not like a payday. The number on what 5 years of an unmatched 3% actually costs by retirement, and it's not small. A $58,000 salary, 3% is about $1,740 a year in missed match alone. Missed for 5 years. Invested from age 28 onward instead of 23, at 7% average annual growth. By 65, that single oversight, just the match, not even Marcus's own contribution, is worth somewhere around $70,000 to $90,000 that simply never existed for him. That's before we account for the fact that he was also not contributing his own 6%, which is the larger piece sitting right next to it. Decision 3 is the one that sounds the most boring and does the most damage. It's the one almost nobody audits even once: fees. When Marcus finally did enroll at 28, his plan defaulted him into an actively managed target date adjacent fund with an expense ratio of 0.95%. He never saw that number. It wasn't hidden exactly. It was disclosed in a fee document he never opened. Priya, meanwhile, spent one Saturday afternoon in her first year actually reading her plan's fund lineup. Found an index fund tracking the total U.S. market with an expense ratio of 0.04% and switched into it. That is not a typo. 95 basis points versus 4. A difference of 0.91%, which sounds like nothing, which is exactly why almost nobody bothers to check it. Here's why it isn't nothing. An expense ratio isn't a one-time fee. It's a permanent tax on the entire balance, charged every single year, including on the growth from previous years. $10,000 forward for 35 years at a 7% gross return. At a 0.04% fee, you end up with roughly 122. At a 0.95% fee, compounding away nearly a full point every year, you end up closer to 92. That's a $30,000 gap from a fee difference most people would describe, if you asked them, as basically the same. Morningstar and multiple academic studies on fund flows have found that expense ratios are one of the single most reliable predictors of long-term investor returns. Reliable, in fact, than manager skill or star ratings, which tend not to persist. The fund that costs less usually wins, not because cheap is virtuous, but because every dollar not paid in fees is a dollar left in the account to keep compounding. Multiply that fee gap across 35 years and a growing balance, layer it on top of the 5-year late start and the missed match. You're already accounting for a meaningful chunk of the eventual $900,000 gap, and we haven't touched the fourth decision yet, which might be the most human one of all. Decision 4 is what happened in March and April of 2020, and again in 2022. It's about what each of them did the moment their account balance turned red. Marcus checked his 401k app on a Tuesday morning in March 2020, watched 2 years of contributions erased in about 3 weeks. As markets fell roughly 34% peak to trough, he did what a huge number of otherwise sensible people did. Moved his allocation to a stable value fund, locking in the loss, telling himself he'd get back in once things calmed down. Things calmed down around August. By then the market had round-tripped most of the way back and kept climbing. Got back in near the top of the recovery, having sold near the bottom and bought back near a local high, which is the single most common and most expensive mistake in personal investing, and it has a name: performance chasing. Or more bluntly, buying high and selling low while feeling in the moment like you're doing something responsible. Priya's account fell by the same percentage. She opened the app once, felt her stomach drop the same way his did. Then did the single most powerful and least discussed thing an investor can do during a crash: nothing. Kept her contribution on autopilot. She didn't check the balance again for 4 months. Dalbar's long-running research on investor behavior has found that the average fund investor's actual returns trail the fund's own stated returns by a significant margin. The entire gap is attributable to timing, buying and selling at the wrong moments, driven by fear and euphoria, rather than staying invested through the cycle. It's not that Priya is smarter than Marcus. It's that she never developed the habit of checking, which meant she never developed the opportunity to panic. This is the part of the video where I want to be very direct with you, because it would be easy to hear all of this as a story about Marcus being careless and Priya being disciplined, and that's not quite it. Nobody sits Marcus down at 23 and says, in plain terms, that a 5-year delay costs 6 figures, that an unchecked default fee costs 5 figures, that a single afternoon of panic selling costs more than both combined. Entire system is built on defaults, disclosures nobody reads, and psychology nobody is warned about.